a gingerbread person, so maybe a little bit like that. A dollop of this chia seed jam on top. And so you would get the sweetness of the fruit. My kids, just like a lot of kids out there, actually dealt with pretty significant constipation. It's not really just a child thing. Research is showing that, well, while most adults need close to 30 grams of fiber a day, many of us have less than half of that. There is research that shows that the more involved kids are in with making food, that the more curious they are and the more open-minded they are. Hi everyone, my name is Angel and I've been a dietitian since about 2012, and I'm glad you're here with me today because we're making weekend waffles that will serve the whole family, adults, older kids, and little ones that may have already started to eat solids from 6 to 12 months. Now, before we go ahead and get started, I just wanted you to know that all of the content shared today is for general education and entertainment purposes. It's not meant to replace the advice of healthcare providers that you may be seeing. If you are dealing with any health-related issues and need customized advice, please speak with a medical health care provider because they will know you best. And I hope that you enjoy the time that we have here together, because waffles are a family favorite in this home. And in fact, my mom used to really enjoy waffles as well. I have very fond memories of us going to White Spot, which is a local family restaurant, to enjoy that with some whipped cream and strawberries and all that. And today we're just here to make a healthier version, should your family choose to kick up the nutrient density of a family favorite of yours. All right, so the first thing we're gonna make are flaxseed waffles, and I actually got this recipe inspiration many years ago from someone who posted on All Recipes. So I apologize, I don't remember the original author, but I do want to give credit where it's due. I didn't create this, but I've just adapted it for myself. So I'm going to gather the ingredients, and I realize that I can make waffles from scratch, but as a busy working mom, I have to say it really helps to use mix every now and again. And so moms, if you're curious about how I'm gonna adapt this to older kids and whatnot, stay tuned, because I am gonna show you how one meal can be converted to match hopefully your family's needs as well. Okay, so I do need mix. I need the flaxseed, of course. And then I'm also gonna grab some eggs and milk from the fridge. So for this recipe, I only need 2 eggs, so that's all I'm gonna grab. So these are all of the ingredients that I need to make these waffles. But before the milk goes bad from being on the counter for too long, I'll just show you quickly. So what I have here is actually plain lactose-free milk. It's 1%. And many people live with something called lactose intolerance, which is where our bodies don't make enough of the enzyme called lactase in sufficient quantities to help us break down lactose, which is a milk sugar naturally present in dairy products. And so this is definitely plain milk, but what they've done, if you look into the ingredient section, is right here, it will say partially skimmed milk, because it's 1% in this case, lactase, which is the enzyme that my body is not producing enough of, and therefore it's giving our bodies what our own bodies are not making enough of to help break down the lactose milk sugar. And in Canada, where I am from, we also fortify the milk with vitamin A and vitamin D3 to help support better health. Now, why I want to share all those nutrition facts with you is maybe because you have lactose intolerance, but also to just showcase that if you are somebody who likes sweet things but is trying to maybe reduce added sugar intake, this is an interesting way to do it, because lactose-free milk, believe it or not, actually tastes a little bit sweeter than natural milk. And the reason why this lactose-free milk tastes sweeter than plain milk, even though there's no added sugar in there, is because the lactase enzyme breaks up that lactose milk sugar into the 2 compounds. So it breaks it up into to the glucose and galactose compounds, which are naturally sweeter. And so when you drink this milk, whether you're an adult, whether you're a child, you're going to be pleasantly surprised that, wow, like it really tastes quite different. So it helps people who need to have sweeter things but trying to cut down on added sugar to still have something that has no added sugar but slightly sweeter. So you can totally enjoy this even if you have no lactose intolerance. All right, so without further ado, I want you to know that this is pretty quick and hopefully simple and straightforward. Now, I have this super huge kind of container here, and Krusteaz has been around for a long time. I am pretty loyal to Costco, and so I think I bought this when it was on sale. Now, what I am looking for, this is real life. I didn't bother to make things really neat and tidy because real life is what I'm going for. All right. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab a 1 cup measure. Now, obviously you can follow the package instructions of your pancake or waffle mix, but I've just used this so many times that I kind of know exactly what I need. So in here, I'm gonna add 1.5, 1.5 cups of this pancake mix. And in the past, I've also done this with the Kodiak protein waffle mix. I think that Costco was also selling because I like to try new things. And it turned out just as well. I think because that particular mix had the protein powder added to it, the result was a little bit less fluffy, a little bit more denser tasting, but my kids and I didn't mind, and my kids are old enough to have that, so it was fine. All right, so I've got 1.5 cups of mix, and then here, because I just bought this ground flaxseed yesterday, I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of this. Now I want you to know that people who are vegetarian or vegan, or even if you're not, you're just choosing to add more fiber into your diet, ground flaxseed is a great way to do it because second to chia seed, ground flaxseed is one of the simplest ways to add more fiber and more omega-3s into your diet. Now, kids, at least my kids, don't always like high fiber things, like especially whole grain bread or whole wheat bread, and they may not necessarily want omega-3 rich foods such as fatty fish, and they may not be a huge fan of things like walnuts or whatnot, but ground flaxseed, when you mix it into quite a carby rich item, it tends to actually be quite well received. And you don't always have to tell your kids exactly what goes into every single recipe. Now, I'm not saying you're going to lie to them, but you don't always have to say everything. And just see if they like it first. That's totally up to you. All right, so I just stirred it together. And then all I'm going to do is crack 2 eggs. And another way to get omega-3s is you can buy omega-3. You can buy omega-3 eggs. And you might be wondering, well, how do they make omega-3 eggs? They actually feed flaxseed to the chicken. And then the chicken then lays the egg and the omega-3s go into the egg. Okay, so I'm just gonna add the milk. And I'm just gonna stir it up. Now, I realize I can use a whisk, but because I'm also the person who does most of the dishes, I'm just gonna see how this goes, and if I need to, I'll convert. But like, for example, if my kids were here with me right now, I would totally just get them involved in making this, because there is research that shows that the more involved kids are in with making food, that the more curious they are and the more open-minded they are about trying new things. Now, of course, that's not a guarantee. Here we go, so a spoon did it. Yay! All right, so you might be thinking to yourself, okay, well, this waffle mix or pancake mix is looking a little thick, and it might actually get thicker and thicker as you make each successful waffle, because of course, when ground flaxseed is so rich in soluble fiber, it's constantly absorbing the fluid, which is the milk, in here as we go. So don't get thrown off by that. I've made this so many times I can't even tell you, and it does get thicker, but you don't have to add more fluid if you don't want to. If it really bothers you, you could. In fact, I haven't done it, so I can't tell you if the end result is much different. All right, so I'm just waiting for my waffle irons to warm up here. I actually have a traditional waffle maker, which I got when I got married, and it's still holding strong, so yay. And then I actually have this tiny little waffle iron that makes like gingerbread men or gingerbread people here. It's just really, really quite cute. But I do not have the patience to make this much batter with such a small little thing, because I mean, I just got to get breakfast done. So I'm hoping that I can show you. Whenever I try to make waffles, I might actually make a double portion so that I can freeze ones and then keep it in the freezer so that I can quickly microwave them or air fry them to warm them up, because who has time to serve waffles on a weekday morning, especially if you have a long drive or commute to work. So on my waffle irons, like, it's turned green, so I know it's ready. At least this large one is. I'll just put the small one there for a second. I'm using a cooking oil spray. Let's see if you can see that. Yeah, you can. Okay. Cooking oil spray. You can be more precise, but it's roughly half a cup or so, depending on the size of your waffle maker. I've just had too many times where I've been over ambitious and overfilled this, and I really, really hate cleaning up the mess of an overfilled waffle maker, so I'd rather err on the side of small, even if I sacrifice a little bit of the aesthetics on the side. So same thing over here. Just gonna spray that a little bit, and I'm just gonna spoon. So for those of you who actually have these tiny mini waffle makers, it's really easy to overfill. So I'm supposed to just fill up the person and let that go. As that's cooking, for those of you who are not so familiar with making waffles, pretty soon now you're gonna see steam coming out from the sides, and that's just the liquid evaporating. Once you start to see the steam slow down or it's non-existent, you can pretty much check. So for a large size like this, typically maybe that's 4 to 5 minutes. Smaller size, maybe a bit less time. Just because I worry that things are undercooked, especially if I'm serving it to children or little ones. Like, we are gonna do something called a toothpick test and stick it into the middle just to double check that it comes out clean, so that we're not serving undercooked waffles and pancakes to anybody. Because undercooked, in there we actually put in some eggs, right? So undercooked eggs in these batter style recipes are not great, and we want to prevent food-related illnesses or foodborne illnesses as much as possible. So you might see the steam here. It is coming up. What we're gonna make later on in a few minutes here is we're gonna be making a chia seed jam to go with it, so that we don't have to rely on a lot of additional added sugars and whatnot, like maple syrup and whatnot. As much as I love them, I'm just gonna give you an alternative. And in terms of the nutrients for babies and for older kids, one thing so far, even if we didn't add the chia seed jam, is my kids, just like a lot of kids out there, actually dealt with pretty significant constipation. It was a road I'd rather us not have been on, but I became hyper aware as they grew older of bowel watching. I was constantly asking, do you have to go poo-poo? Did you already go poo? Or checking diapers when they were even younger. And so what I discovered was I needed to find creative ways to add more fiber into their diet while simultaneously making sure that they drink enough fluid. Because while it's really easy for us to harp on the fiber, if we suddenly increase a lot of fiber into children's diets or even our own diets, all that extra fiber is supposed to gather the fluid on our intestines or scrape the sides of the large intestine and help us with constipation and diarrhea, both things. But if we don't at the same time increase the fluid intake, we can actually create issues of gas and bloating no matter what age we are. So if that's an issue that your kids or you are dealing with, I would say enjoy these flaxseed waffles if they work for your household, but also be mindful that you're going to have some additional water, maybe enjoy it with a cup of lactose-free or whatever milk of choice you prefer. So I'm noticing that the steam level is going down a little bit, but it's still present. So it's probably almost done. So right now I'm going to show you, if I am making this for a bunch of people, I obviously don't want to just serve a couple people and the other people are twiddling their thumbs. So we're just gonna have a common plate. And nobody really likes soggy waffles. My son, who's in grade school, actually said, Mom, I learned a new acronym for learning like northeast, southwest. And then he says, never eat soggy waffles. Yeah, I guess I took the hint. He doesn't like soggy waffles. Okay, so we're gonna lift this up right now. Just testing, I don't know for sure. Okay, so it's looking pretty good. Now, toothpick test means you just take a clean toothpick, not one you've already used. And so I stuck it in, and then you can see that there's no wet batter sticking to it. Like, it's just little dry specks. And on the baby one, or the littler one, it's the same thing. Okay, so what that means is I can actually move this. You might use tongs, but my family uses chopsticks for a lot of things, so I'm actually just gonna use a chopstick. And just lift this up. And wooden chopsticks are great because it won't kill your pan, especially non-stick coated pans. So I'm just gonna grab this and put it over top. And then, oh, you know what? I can probably do a little one. Will this work? Ooh, I don't know. Maybe not this. Okay. You may have more equipment than me, in which case great, but I've always taught the kids how I grew up was use what we have. Okay, I'm using a metal rack because like by doing so, it's allowing air to flow through like the bottom and the top to keep it from turning really soggy. If I put this direct on the plate, then the condensation, the heat emitting from this waffle, it's going to touch the bottom, and the bottom of this waffle is going to be super soggy as I continue to do more. So same thing, whatever you have at home to just create some distance between the plate and your stack of waffles. I have a family of 4, so I'm just gonna make a little bit more as we continue chatting. I don't know, if you have a favorite topping that you like with your waffles, feel free to comment and share. For my kiddos, they've discovered whipped cream. So that's one of their favorite things to enjoy lately. And I discovered that Costco sells like whipped cream in the can, which is good because it has a longer lifespan than if I bought the actual whipping cream. Now, but before I felt comfortable introducing whipped cream to my kiddos, I actually would serve the waffles with nut butter. And that was my way of getting a little bit more protein into them as well as part of breakfast, because they really, really didn't enjoy eggs, and they actually still don't unless it's in a recipe. So while these ones are cooking, let me just show you a little bit how to modify this a little better. To serve these, I'm just gonna grab a cutting board. Now, adults later, I'll show you how we can plate that up. You don't really need to modify that unless the adult has allergies, of course, to watch for. An older child might really appreciate just having this completely displayed on their plate, where they can just put on different toppings, like a little breakfast bar and whatnot. But if you have a child who's only about 6 months, first and foremost, like this particular recipe does have multiple food allergens. Like here, there's wheat and milk in the ingredient section in terms of allergens for this particular pancake mix. So that's already 2 different allergens. And when your child at 6 months old has not been exposed to each of those allergens, you need to introduce them as a singular food first to just make sure they're not reacting to it. Once you have given them as a singular food, you know that they're not allergic to it, then you can offer foods and recipes that have all of those things. Because the eggs that we threw in here is also another common allergen. And so just be really mindful. And the dairy that we added as well, similar to the milk in this mix here, it's another thing to watch for. So baby's not gonna really complain that I don't get to see the whole gingerbread man. But in this case, what we can do is we can just cut it up. And why am I cutting it this size? It's because You're aiming for a size that's about the width of 2 fingers. You can probably see that it's covering my 2 fingers like that, and enough that a baby that's still doing this kind of hold is able to hold on to that and bring it to their mouth. So especially for moms that are choosing to do baby-led weaning, this is like the size you're aiming for. Now, by around the time that your baby is developing that pincer grasp for the first time, you can then further chop up. I feel bad chopping the man, so I'm just gonna stop. Or the gingerbread man, so I'm just gonna chop it up. You can then kind of chop it into smaller pieces. Now the size is gonna depend on, you know your child the best in terms of what size they're able to grasp. It might actually need to be smaller, because you want to be very careful that the size is not going to block their airway, especially because children who are learning to eat, they need pieces that are not going to completely occlude the airway. So depending on where your baby's at, you're creating these tiny little diced up amounts. And then for even younger children who are just learning to eat, like this may not be the most favorite thing that they enjoy. So just watch for that. Okay, so once the waffles are cooled down, that's all the waffles I'm gonna make, so I can show you other things because you get the idea. If you weren't here with me and I wasn't afraid of boring you, I'd probably finish all the batter, but I'm just gonna put that aside so that we can focus on other things. I promised that I would show you how to make a chia seed jam to go with these pancakes as an alternative. Again, the kind of theme of today is looking at ways for the whole family to enjoy a family favorite while adding to the nutrient density. So that's one of the reasons why we're going to make this chia seed jam, is because it's constipation, inadequate fiber intake, it's not really just a child thing. In fact, most adults, like North American-based research is showing that, well, while most adults age 18 and over need close to 30 grams of fiber a day, many of us actually walk around and have less than half of that. So how are we going to change this? Well, by making some substitutions of some common favorites of things that we enjoy, we build more nutrition in without sacrificing flavor. So what I have here is some frozen berries. This will work with whatever fruit. So we're just gonna put in 2 cups of frozen fruit. This will work with any fruit, but I just want to be really mindful that for people that may have oral allergy syndrome or might not do well with certain fruits, you really just pick whichever fruit that works best for you. Okay. But this is a really fun recipe to make with kids, because then they'll be like, whoa, I can make jam like this. So we're just going to put 2 cups of these frozen mixed berries, and I'm just going to turn it to about medium. Now, I'm just going to add a tiny bit, like maybe just like a swirl of water into this. Because frozen fruit has moisture in them already, you don't actually have to add too much. So, as this is warming up, I'm just gonna grab the cheese. Okay, so I'm gonna let that go. Now, for those of you who are not so familiar with using chia seeds, they can get everywhere. As you can tell, I'm kind of clean as I go. Okay, so chia seeds they look like this. I don't know if you can see that, but it's really, really tiny. Just these tiny little black specks of stuff, like the size of black sesame or even smaller. And contrary to what some people think, you actually don't need to cook it. Like, you could just simply sprinkle this onto plain yogurt. You can sprinkle this into anything you're just consuming right away. But lots of people like making it into pudding or adding it to smoothies. So just know that that's okay. So you can see that water is being released from the frozen fruit. And I do want it to soften up a little bit further before I add the chia seed. So I just up the heat a little bit. And with a wooden spoon or whatever device you have, you can mash that fruit down, because root jam that you're probably used to doesn't have these like whole pieces. So we're just trying to break down the fruit a little bit here. And you can see that beautiful, vibrant color coming out. It's amazing. Now, different colors of the rainbow actually contain different phytonutrients. And so it's really important that from an early age, we introduce color to kids, because a lot of our food habits as adults are shaped by what we have as children and how we grew up. And a lot of times, if we have a very unintentionally low variety kind of diet, it can actually shape our willingness to explore new things later on in adulthood. Or we may then struggle with food textures or food flavors later on. I strongly believe that all parents do the best that they can. And at least I know that to be true of my own parents and of all the parents I've had the honor and privilege of working with. And I believe that education is the key to helping us constantly be better versions of ourselves. Okay, so you can see that the fruit is breaking down. The raspberries, blackberries have definitely almost dissolved. I'm going to bring the heat down a little bit, back down to medium, and this is the stage where I feel comfortable adding 2 tablespoons of chia seed. Okay, so 2, okay, that's pretty easy to remember so far. 2 cups of frozen fruit, 2 tablespoons of chia seed. As distracted as I get, I never want to accidentally tip over my chia seeds, because I will just spend the next 3 hours trying to clean all of it. Okay, so as you stir in the chia seed is incredibly rich in soluble fiber. And again, like, fiber is something that adults and children do need to have more of. So if you're a toast and jam kind of person in the morning, this is a great way to up the fiber using what is traditionally a condiment. Okay? Now, as this cooks a little bit further, I'm just going to cut it down to like simmer. As this cooks, we're going to add even a little bit more to up the flavor profile as well as the nutrition. So we're always talking about like, how do whole foods get built in a very real life practical kind of way. Okay, so I know that the pot is on simmer. I'm just going to add a little bit of fresh lemon. So you can actually do a little bit of zest into the jam as well. And how you would do that is you can add like a flat kind of grater and just push this, rub this along the sides. And like a lot of those natural oils on the skin of citrus fruits is what just makes so many things so wonderfully delicious. So that's in. And then I'm just going to add a squeeze of fresh lemon. And I think that'll brighten it up, add some naturally occurring vitamin C, which has antioxidant properties. And that's it, and it smells wonderful. If my home can smell like fresh lemons all the time, that wouldn't be a terrible thing. Okay, so now of course, you can actually leave this to cook further, but I know that I don't have to, because as chia seeds get exposed to any liquid, it will continue to swell. So we can actually just turn off the heat, and I'm going to show you over on the other side what we can do. Over here, As it cools down, it's actually going to get thicker and thicker, and I know some people like to, at this point, transfer it over, put it in the fridge, keep it for a couple hours, and then maybe serve it like later or the next day. I mean, but my family likes warm things, so we actually don't mind just having it like this. So how are we going to put this all together? Well, let me show you a couple options. First things first, before I forget. If you do have a child that is 6 to 12 months old, you have to be very, very careful. I'm showing you right now that the blueberries in here didn't fully break down. So they're still like whole berries. You cannot serve this like this because anything that's round shaped like this, you absolutely need to make sure that it's like completely minced. If it was a fresh blueberry, you would be cutting it, quartering it, just to make sure it doesn't get stuck in their airway. Okay, so that's something you gotta be very, very careful of. Some people have a fruit masher or something that they're gonna do to really push it through. Some people use a sieve or they blend it up. But in this case, I verbally told you, and you can just totally do that. Now, let me show you. Okay, so I guess I don't know in terms of how much jam your family goes through, but because this is fresh made, it's not gonna be like a store-bought jam where you can just leave it for like months in your fridge. You do wanna try to consume it in the fridge within a week if it lasts your family that long. But if you don't, then these are the baby cubes that actually my 6 and 8-year-old used when they were babies, and I still kept them because I still think they're super useful, and they're 2-ounce portions. You can actually use them for all sorts of things. So like right now, I can portion this in and I can throw this into the freezer, and that way I will have homemade chia seed jam that will last in the freezer for 3 months, and I can just take this little cube and microwave it later and use it because I don't always have the time to make chia seed jam, such is life. So I'll leave that on the side to cool down a little bit before I put it in the freezer. Now onto plating. So I'm just gonna put this flaxseed waffle on the center, and I just told you that my family likes to have whipped cream. So we're gonna do it one way to show you how the final product would look. So I don't know, to make it fun. I don't like covering up the face of the gingerbread person, so maybe a little bit like that. And then I would just add a dollop of this chia seed jam on top. And so you would get the sweetness of the fruit in there, the tartness of the squeeze of lemon. If you think this is too tart for you after you taste test it, you can add a little bit of sugar as you're putting it together. You could also add honey if that's your preference, but if you are serving this to an under 1-year-old child, you cannot add honey. And I couldn't be more serious because babies under 1 year of age actually have a underdeveloped immune system and digestive system, and they're at risk of something called infant botulism, which is something that if they were to eat anything with honey, that greatly increases their risk. So please do not serve honey, whether it's honey that you added like this and you're like, oh, shouldn't it be okay because it's cooked? No. Raw honey, cooked honey, pasteurized honey, unpasteurized honey, whatever kind of honey, you cannot serve it to babies under 1 year old. Okay? And so just be mindful. If you're worried about accidentally forgetting, then don't sweeten with honey with things that you're cooking with. Just sweeten with regular sugar or any other things to sweeten. Okay. So this is the waffles. And something else I wanted you to know is that my family actually really enjoys adding nuts. But in terms of how you would do this is, assuming your family doesn't have nut allergies, we prefer to buy like unsalted nuts, and you could just sprinkle that on top. And you just have to be mindful that if you're serving this again to a child, you cannot give whole nuts. So how you would modify this, like say this is your toddler or child plate, right? How you would serve this is, again, depending on the size, like we went over that just now. Like you're not gonna sprinkle this on top because that's a complete choking hazard. But instead, what you can do is you can buy natural, smooth peanut butter. So those are two keywords you need to look for, because natural means that there's no, well, in Canada, you do have to look carefully. Like, natural peanut butter means that there's no added sugar or salt. So when you go to the ingredients, it should say the only thing that should be on there should be the nut. So in this case, it says dry roasted peanuts. The other thing is that smooth is really important. You cannot serve chunky peanut butter to a baby under 1 year old because those tiny little chunks are not suitable for them. So smooth, natural, and what you're gonna do is you cannot give babies huge dollops of peanut butter, because you can see it's gloppy. And like that glop, if they just put it in their airway, that could be really quite dangerous. It's another choking hazard. So how you're gonna modify this is you're just gonna grab a little bit, and maybe that's even too much. And if you're, again, doing the baby-led weaning and you're thinking baby's gonna grab it like this, you're just gonna apply it so it's this super thin layer. Like, there shouldn't be globs. Okay, super thinly spread. Is this gonna be messy? Yes. Yes, it's gonna be very messy. Are you gonna have to clean baby's hands with soap and water very well after? Yes. But starting solids and getting them to enjoy new foods and textures, like, it's all worth it. Okay, so that's how thinly spread it is, okay? And so then they're gonna grab it, be able to bring it to their mouth. And again, nuts are a common food allergen as well, so just make sure that they can actually have it. And yeah, so that's how you would serve it. This particular chia seed jam, I didn't add any honey to this. So I can actually do one of two things. I can actually add a little bit of this, being careful that I'm not giving a whole blueberry there. I can just actually add a little bit onto here and just spread it on. And look at that beautiful color and extra flavor and fiber on that for your child, right? But another option is, if you want to keep foods a little bit more separate, you could just put it on the side. So lots of caregivers might prefer to keep things separate on maybe a bento plate of sorts and leave the curiosity and discovery to the child. So again, if they had the pincer grass, they would be grabbing it like that. And maybe just let them decide if they're gonna touch it a little bit before they put it in their mouth. So those are all options. I probably wouldn't give babies the whipped cream because added sugar, it's one of those flavors that as human beings, we don't really need to train ourselves to like added sugar. It comes very naturally to us. Whereas other flavors, we may need flavors and textures. We may need more exposure to build that in. And so I guess I want you to consider allowing your child to enjoy the natural flavors and textures of foods as much as possible. Although that's sort of something to bear in mind, that in the early days, like 6 to 9 months, you really want to give foods more in the natural state. And then 9 to 12 months, the goal shifts to, as they get towards their 1 year old birthday, you're trying to get them to enjoy more family meals, more table meals. And by 1 year old, really, hopefully they're just enjoying what the rest of the family is having, so that you're not being a short order cook. All right. So that's what I had planned for our waffle weekend, but I want to show you one additional thing that you can do to make this family brunch a little more special. Let me know if you like coffee. Like, I personally really like coffee, but my husband doesn't. And so one thing that I've learned to make that we both really enjoy actually is matcha lattes. And so as a coffee alternative to our lovely weekend waffle breakfast time is matcha lattes. And so matcha actually has caffeine as well. It's green tea. I will use up the rest of this bottle for people who are wondering if I'm just going to waste food. I was brought up to never waste food. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to clean my plate or that I teach my kids to clean our plates the way that I was brought up. But it does mean that I will stop when I'm full, and then put away leftovers or freeze them. Okay, so I guess I don't really measure the matcha, and sorry that this is clumsy. Okay, so I know people have different ways of doing this. This is just my lazy way that I don't want to put this through a sieve and wash another thing. But I sorry, I'm struggling with this plastic spoon. I'm gonna convert. Give me a sec. If you're not a huge fan of green tea or matcha, this may not be for you, but for those who like those Asian flavors, I hope you'll enjoy this. Now, should I be more wary of lumps? I would probably put that powder through a sieve. I guess the more and more I think about it, I should probably show you the real way so that you can do it at home. Okay. Don't be lazy, Angel. Okay. This is a sieve. I'm sure there's fancy matcha making tools out there. I'm so sure. But I'm gonna use what I have. Okay. So if I was doing the matcha latte and I'm putting this through, by pushing it through a sieve, I'm getting rid of a lot of the clumpiness of matcha powder without getting a fancy kind of matcha whisk or yet another gadget that fills up my cabinet. So I'm just gonna do that. It wasn't actually that much more work, so come on, Angel. All right. So now I've got the powder in here, and I do find that even though I love green tea the way that it is, there is a slight kind of bitter flavor to it. So my salt and sugar containers are in the same thing, and I just look to see that it's glistening. My children made me proud the other day when my daughter, who's just turned 6, was able to identify which one was sugar and which one was salt and teach her older brother, because she's like, sugar is shiny, the salt is not shiny. And then she goes on to proceed, oh, okay, I can do a taste test too, but she was right. So I'm just gonna add about a teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons if I'm making 2 cups. You can omit the sugar if you don't want to add it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add, I have a hot water dispenser, and I'm just gonna add a little bit in and just create a dissolved paste. The thing about matcha is that it's got a little bit of caffeine, so it's an alternative to coffee, which if you use less matcha powder, the caffeine content would obviously be a little bit lower, and it may for you be a little bit more gentle than the caffeine from coffee. It may not cause as much sort of jitteriness or whatever negative symptom that coffee gives you, but it all depends on how much you're having and how often. Now, in terms of the nutrition information of matcha, it really depends on where you're buying from. This one I got was from Costco, and so if I were to look at the nutrition facts, 2 teaspoons would give it's 15 calories, although I don't really promote people focusing too much on calories. It's got 0 grams of saturated fat, 0 trans fat. It's got 2 grams of fiber, which is whoa, why would it have fiber? Well, because your thing, hopefully like mine, the ingredient is only organic matcha green tea powder. So quite literally it's the matcha, the green tea leaf that's turned into a powder. So that's why there's fiber even in the drink that we're making here today. So I think you're getting the theme here. And it's got 0 sugar because there's no added sugar in this particular one, which is what I prefer. And for children and babies, this is an adult drink. You don't want to give caffeine to babies. For kids, there's actually, in Canada, there's actually caffeine recommendations depending on how old your child is. And for us here in Canada, it's usually based upon how many milligrams of caffeine per body weight of your child. So it's not so much their biological age, rather it's the size of the child, because the caffeine content is what we're worried about, how it's going to affect them. So you'd want to follow wherever your country is in terms of their caffeine guidelines, but older kids, okay, we're talking kids that are at the very least attending elementary school. But older kids, like preteens, teenagers, the older they grow, the more caffeine they're able to have without adverse effects. And so you can tell from the mixing that there's no lambs because we did the sieve. It's completely dissolved, so it just becomes this like green liquid. I'm just gonna free pour this to about 2 cups or whatnot of the lactose-free milk. And remember that the lactose-free milk is also sweeter, like I just shared with you earlier today. So even though I just added 2 teaspoons of white refined sugar, between that and the lactose-free milk, this should taste plenty sweet for me and my husband's taste buds. Now there's 2 things I can do. I can either wash another pot and put that on the stove, or I can put it into a microwave and let that do the work for me. Okay, which in this case, I have enough dishes to wash. I'm just gonna let it microwave, and then I'm gonna pour it out and show you. Now, at this point in time, let me just highlight a couple things, is that I know I mentioned months and abilities. All babies are different. So I don't want you to feel pressure that, oh, my baby is 9 months old now, and they're not quite doing the pincer grasp yet. It's okay. If you're worried about developmental milestones, talk with your pediatrician, talk with your healthcare provider, and to just see, is there a cause for concern? Or maybe you blink a day, a week later, your baby is going to develop that skill. The key is you do want to give opportunity. You want to monitor closely what your baby's development, whatever developmental milestones are being achieved at any given point, and to not allow your stress and anxiety to come across during mealtime, because babies are actually quite sensitive to the facial expressions of their care provider, and they learn to relax while eating and develop those positive feelings and relationships around the whole food eating experience, or they pick up on the negative expressions, the stress, the worry, and then suddenly dining becomes a little bit more of a negative experience. So we do want to be mindful of what unintentional vibes are we giving our kids and our babies over something that's going to be part of their entire lives, because eating is not something that we can give up, and certainly not something we should give up. And we want to maintain the joy around eating as much as possible. Okay, so we talked about the key points, and I think if you have any questions, feel free to add them right now. Okay. So let me get a cap, and I'll show you. All right. So maybe 2 minutes is like hot enough or not hot enough, depending on your microwave. But for us, it's plenty hot. I have a cup here that I just washed and put the water. Okay, so you can see the steam. I'm just gonna fill it to the top. My husband can have all of it. This is a huge mug. I love these mugs. These are from my sister. It was a housewarming gift. I love you. I love you, sister. Okay, so there you have it. A matcha latte drink that has fiber in it. And I just hope that you really like all of the little pieces that help you bring a little bit more fiber into your weekend breakfast. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful day.